Hi everyone. Around 2 weeks ago, I was instructed by the Lord to get my house in order and write my testimony. And at the time, I wrote it all out and didn't really have a reason to at the end. And I think he's finally told me today what that reason is, and it's to share it with others. And in the event that it may help somebody like myself who, for 39 years of my life, had no clue about who I was and about, God's word and about the world around me. And, while I always knew I had good discernment about what the world was to a degree, I never sort of really put the pieces together until one day, and I'll talk about that and through this. But first, I just want to start with a very short prayer. Heavenly Father, please grant me the right words during this testimony, so that it may land on the hearts of others that desperately need to hear it. If it helps one person, Father, it's worth it. If it helps one person to seek more information, to get curious, to try and figure out the deceit that they're surrounded by, that they're not aware of. So, in Jesus' name, Amen. All right, so I'm going to start reading, and I'll add a few things as I get along. Mind my croaky voice. I've been in bed for 2 days sick. The Lord told me not to be vain and to get up and to do this, and this is my first video ever, and it's not something I'm used to doing or ever thought I would do, but here we go. If you asked me even just a few years ago if I would see myself believing in Jesus and the Lord God, then I would have laughed loudly or made some smart-ass remark. Forgive me here on the sheer size of this story. I figured if I lay things out, it might show how events are have all culminated to the present moment. I do not share these things to boast, look at me, I am special, but they come from a place in the hope that there are others like me out there, that at some point were unsure and undecided on what is truth, who they are, and what is deep programming keeping us from finding the Most High. While we all go on our own individual journey, I no longer feel alone and misunderstood, but rather foolish for missing the most obvious truth that has been in front of my eyes the whole time. And for somebody who researches and spends a lot of time, breaking things apart and trying to know bits of everything, the truth was right in front of my eyes and completely just oblivious to it. So here is a summarized version with key moments that I believe God intervened in my life. As for why, I do not know, but I feel thankful that He cared so much to wake me up. And when I wrote this at the time, I actually wrote, I do not know, but I know that it's because He loves us so much. We're His children, right? My early years. As a child, my earliest memory of around 5 years old, I used to struggle to quiet my mind. I would wake in the middle of the night to stand by my bedroom window, trying to make sense of this heartbeat pulse thumping sound in one of my ears. It was like a da-dum, da-dum, but I used to describe it as the wolf sound, because it had this kind of dark kind of sound to it. As a child, I always thought of it as the big bad wolf was coming across the creek. We had a creek between my grandparents' house and my family's farm. I have no idea why, but was absolutely convinced the creature, the big bad wolf, was coming to get me in the middle of the night. I had a loving family, so there was no trauma in my life at that point. I did not know where this came from. I was a happy child, and nothing else really stood out. As for the ear thing, sure, it could have been something medical, but I'm still not sure. By early primary school, I was somewhat of a prodigy with technology, computers and the like. I still am to this day. I won't get into my background, but I was inquisitive, logic-driven, analytical, and I would absorb information like a savage, hungry sponge. I was always somewhat of a loner, a quiet kid. I never had close friends, yet I was generally friends with everyone. I would do anything I could to help others. I often cared about others more than myself. It was confusing to me that in my quest to help others, it often resulted in a negative reaction or manipulation of my kindness. I felt misunderstood, found it hard to trust others after a while, but always remained inquisitive and searching for knowledge and truth. Yeah, it always really bothered me that when I try and help somebody, even in the smallest way, that, they would sort of, hit my hands away, or they would get really upset with me, or they would just act in a strange, odd manner that didn't make sense, like occasionally I would get a thank you or I'd get nice remarks, but generally it was like people saw weakness in me for doing this, and I just couldn't understand it. I did my best to be cool and fit in, but throughout my entire school life I always felt extremely misunderstood, like 99% of teenagers, of course. Fell into the wrong crowds often, but always kept an honest heart of truth and good, always for good. When I was around 8 years old, I started to have significant chunks of time missing from the school day. Blank, zero, nothing in my memory of missing hours. I would do strange things like go home from school without my bag and have no memory of leaving school to come home. I would be asked to stand up and write on the blackboard, and sometimes I would just draw lines on nonsensical things. I drew the weird card from my peers. Now, one thing I won't touch on too much in this story was at the time my parents were fighting heavily, and there was a lot of trauma in my household. So every day was my parents were fighting, and while they amazing people these days, they're not together anymore. They weren't so together. It got quite dark in my family. So I drew the weird card from my peers. This led to humiliation by my peers and a breakdown of confidence for several years. It was like I was in some sort of limbo, or I would mentally go away and come back. The doctors tried to throw different medications at me, but nothing helped. But that thumping noise in my ear continued. The big bad wolf would come and go at its leisure in my ear. I became severely angry. I would come and go, and I would just internalize it, a kind of rage. My parents came to the conclusion there was actually nothing wrong with me, and eventually all this just stopped on its own. Once again, I think it was the trauma. But this next event, this is probably one of the biggest moments in my life, and I've told multiple people this story. However, it's only the ones that are close to me that believed me, and I call this the visitor. All right. So when I was approximately 9 or 10, while asleep on the top bunk in the middle of the night, and forgive me if I get emotional telling this because it terrifies me, okay? I was asleep on the top bunk in the middle of the night, facing the wall. I felt a tap on my shoulder. All right, so I'm facing the wall, and I felt this tap. And, being a kid, what do you think? You think it's, your brother or somebody trying to wake you up, so it's just a normal event, right? Thinking it was my older brother, 1 year older than me, I said, "Go away," followed by his name, and tried to drift off back to sleep. What felt like a minute or two later, I felt another tap on my shoulder, followed by the grab that had the strength akin to a man's hand. I rolled over to curse at my brother to stop it, and about 30 centimeters from my face was this bluish-grey, transparent figure staring directly at me. The top half of its face kept changing. Hard to tell if it was male or female. I remember trying to focus on it, just try and understand what I was looking at. But the bottom in full focus, so I could see its lower part of its jaw, like from sort of here down, was in strong focus. It was almost like like what you see on movies where, the aliens or whatever you want to call them, ghosts, where they're able to be partially invisible, but they're solid. They're a solid mass. That's kind of what it felt like at the time. It felt like it was like, some sort of demon cloaking or alien cloaking. But it was fully solid and visible and able to grab me. And I'll never forget how hard it grabbed me. The top half of its face kept changing, hard to tell if it was male or female, but the bottom in full focus of its jaw had these pincer-like teeth that reminded me of the creature from the movie Predator. It was truly terrifying. Its face looked like it enjoyed the moment, was super curious on what it was seeing, and I have zero doubt this was some sort of form of evil with bad intention. This was my introduction to evil, existing, and belief in the paranormal. I looked it up and down. That image is burned into my brain forever. It was terrifying. Being brave, I somehow managed to get the strength to pick up my pillow and yell at it to go. And surprisingly, in almost fear, it proceeded to run slow motion out of the room and watched it disappear through a wall down the hallway of my house. I could see it running away and actually disappear through the wall itself. For over 30 years, I slept with the light on. Actually, it hasn't been 30 years. Hang on. Yes, it has been 30 years. 30. Yeah, so I'm 39 now. So, yeah, okay. So, well, let's just say for 30 years, I slept with the light on in my room. I could never have my back to the door. This moment was there with me every night I was alone. I'm not sure when I actually overcame it, but from a young age, it was my confirmation that there was more to this world than many were saying. So just stopping there for a minute, thinking of a nine-year-old child seeing something like that, it got my mind completely just in a loop. I couldn't understand, I couldn't understand what I'd seen and couldn't make sense of it. I remember telling my parents and running in there and screaming, and they just told me I was making it up and, you just had a bad dream and, and all these things. So I kept it to myself. And I wouldn't tell anyone else for probably another 20 years after that. I started, if it came up and I had a few too many beers or whatever, I'd talk about it. Funnily enough, the noise in my ear had ceased, and I no longer heard the noise anymore after this moment. It would be another 28 years before I would hear it briefly again, but only once. I often wonder if that thing saw the goodness in me, or that God was there with me that night, and it ran in fear because of this. Either way, the big bad wolf did finally come to visit me. Finally. All right. I'll try and speed this up a little bit. It's a pretty long story, but we're 12 minutes in here. Searching for a place to call home. Flashing forward to my 20s, I love music. I could hold a decent tune as a singer, yet my passion lied in the creation, the songwriting process. In the actual writing of the lyrics, being able to articulate thoughts and feelings and encapsulating them into words. It felt natural to me. I felt like I was at home and I wanted to write continuously. We had a band, heavy rock band, sort of screaming with a hint of melody, mostly teenage angsty style music. In short, the band taught me to lead, take charge of situations, formulate plans and execute whatever needed to occur in order to keep things moving in a forward direction. It was my first love, my first passion. It was one of those things that I put everything into. Naturally, as things fell apart after many years, relationships broke down, and I'd find myself sitting out the back of my house one night in deep sadness. Deep sadness. The type of heartbreak when you've lost someone close to you. The band was finished. I felt finished. Done. I didn't know it at the time, but God was listening to my cries. It would come to me suddenly after several weeks that I should construct a studio in order to help others and teach myself how to record and produce music. At the time, this was just another one of my urges that I had to follow. This rekindled my spirit and brought me back from the darkness. I found myself helping others, other teenagers, after our recording sessions or having a beer, making sense of their world, offering advice and just listening to them. I wasn't one to have great advice to offer, but I always tried to help them. Some today may be lost to drugs and the party life, while others I've seen again are raising families and moved beyond their trauma at that time. It's a confusing time for young people. I hope I had a little bit of something to do with their progress. I might have been a sinner then, drinking beer, swearing and smoking too many cigarettes, but my heart was all for helping those young guys if it ever came up in conversation. At the time of all this, I was unaware it would be 14 years later that this would lead to a career change and working in a role that I love, my current dream job. To save some time, there are so many things I would love to share that follow on from this, but it would be too much to read out here. These urges that I kept having led me to accomplish the following things and turn my life around and completely reinvent myself over and over again. These urges helped me to escape a job that was severely depressing me by offering me new skills, to find fitness, join the military part-time, to find myself on lonely hikes, to leave my current group of toxic friends who mocked me, resented my determination, and never made me feel part of their world. Finding a new group of friends that would form a lifelong bond through hiking and our mountain adventures, our love for camping, real friends. To take on significantly hard physical feats, adventures, to push myself beyond what a normal person can and will, and I believed I could achieve. To relocate my family to a safe, unfamiliar place. To completely abandon our old lives, all of our friends and family, and start again. A random phone call one day initiated this whole thing when I was again in my sadness. To warn me about things to come, to prepare me to awaken, to find God, find peace, and now help save others before it is too late. All of these things I used to equate to pure circumstance, but now I know. Okay. So, I was lost, right? Like I had no clue at all. I was just following the wind. But I had a good heart. You know, I always, from the day I was born, I always had that goodness in me. I always focused on that and lived by that somehow. I did some terrible things to people, as in hurt them, but I never anything, murderous, or I didn't kill anybody or haven't done anything like that. Just, broken a few girls' hearts and a few things like that, and done some things that I wasn't proud of. I was in a bad crowd at school with my friends, and some of the illegal stuff that they would do, I'd always get roped into tagging along with, and all those things. But that's just being a teenager and figuring your life out. Okay, this next phase I'm just gonna run through quickly. It's just about some lessons or some things I learned in the military. So, a round peg in a square regimented world, I call this. This burning desire to help others kept nudging at me. It persisted for most of my life. I always wanted to join the police and went through a process and failed attempted joining the federal police. I figured if I was going to join, I was going to join the most challenging area I could get myself into, the feds. So I made it to the very last round before acceptance. When asked, tell me something hard that you've done in your life. I really don't think I had a lot to lean on here. My life hadn't been hard. I was a geek, sitting at a computer all day, solving problems. I'm still not sure if this question was the ending of it, but it was a great lesson in humility. When I received the letter and they said, you were close, but try again next year. The hard experience would soon come. This led to a random interaction with a friend who was joining the army. Something clicked in my mind and I suddenly was on a mission to join the military. Every morning I would get up at 3 a.m. and run through winter, building up my mind and body through scorching afternoon sun, and undertake all day long hikes with 30 kilos in my pack through steep terrain. I had this vision I would be a great soldier. I would fit in perfectly. My imagination ran wild. The day we arrived on the bus to basic training in Australia, the yelling, the fear, the torment was to quickly be my undoing. It broke me emotionally. This is not what it looked like in the movies. It was much darker. All the fear and the humiliation I had suffered in my past came out. I could barely hold my head up, a shell of a man. I struggled through most of the course. While it was a short course, I struggled not from difficulty, but from emotional baggage, from my parents' divorce, my younger years, things such as having no dad at home. I was sick from a food intolerance, further making things worse, that I had to hide, and felt like a failure, yet somehow made it out to the other side. God likes to place afflictions on his chosen ones, doesn't he? He likes to give us problems with our health and other things to overcome. And at the time, I didn't know why, and I do now. And I always laugh when, I have these problems arise again. It means I've done something I shouldn't have been doing. They wanted me to take on the mindset of a killer, to think like a robot, yet I couldn't do it. I remember being told an inch from my face that I hate guys like you, once standing at attention. He meant that I could not be shifted. Sure, I was compliant, but it was painful for them that I could not be reprogrammed for aggression. To hate others, my soul was too resistant. My wife picked me up from the airport. I broke down. It all came out. The years of hiding all these things deep within me. I couldn't hide it any longer. Nor could I share with her what I'd been through, even just through that section of my training. What a prisoner must have felt like, scratching the days down to a calendar, paper calendar, one of the only possessions I owned at the time. To have one's individual character stolen temporarily. Determined to keep progressing in my military career, I next faced the infantry school. That's where the real fun begins. When my infantry training started, a few months later, I was different. I was the older guy, the calm, collected guy with the answers, ready for hell to break loose as soon as we arrived. But the quiet confidence and the mental will that was unbreakable. Maybe it was the fact that I now, was a private and not a recruit that it helped somewhat. I don't think so. I think it was the breaking down and the realization of all that baggage I'd carried. It had to come out. The demons had to come out. Once the demons came out, I found myself again. Need to remember that. What we carry, we have to leave behind. I learned true suffering through that training. I remember the soles of one of my feet literally peeling off like a bloody yogurt lid in my boots. To the starvation for many days of food and zero sleep, and the torment from our commanders watching our every move. On day 3, I saw soldiers in the night walking around that were not there. I was hallucinating. I saw angels, which I, at the time called UFOs, in my night vision goggles flying all around, and they were everywhere. I saw rocks that moved like crabs, and I felt the suffering of others. I remember having to help this one guy who his job was to take 2 20-litre jerry cans and go and get water. And he got lost because you weren't allowed to have a torch. It was in the middle of the bush. He got completely lost, and I had to go find him, and I didn't even know where I was going, but you had to memorize the track that you walked around. It was a huge track, so there's probably 100 people, and so you get lost. If you turn the wrong direction once, you don't know where you are, and so you feel like crawling on the ground and finding your way around. But anyway, I found him at the bottom of a hill, and his brain had just given up. His mind had shut down completely. He couldn't seem to get it together to carry these jerry cans up the hill. Like his brain just wouldn't work anymore. He was that tired and deprived of everything. So I ended up helping him, and I grabbed both jerry cans and I said, "Mate, I've got it. I'll take it. Come and follow me." He wouldn't follow me, and so anyway, I started getting really upset with him. But he'd just completely given up. I've never seen anybody in my life just completely shut down like that, and this was just in training. So anyway, I took the jerry cans up the hill, and then I had to go back and get him. It was a bit like looking for Bubba, But it was a lesson, it was a lesson in that, I didn't know this guy, but I had to take care of him, and I just, there was nothing else in that situation it required. I had to help him. I couldn't leave him there, and that's a lesson, and that was a lesson God was throwing at me at the time. But yeah, there were lots of those. Where was I up to? Unlike my previous training, I excelled in all the difficult realms and really found someone I was proud of during that hardship. Many important lessons were learned there. I'm so proud of what I did there, that level of my training. I had been rebuilt, reshaped, reformed into a confident and capable Swiss Army knife utility for the Army's disposal. I truly found the stronger part of me through these moments. The Army could never take that back, so I was incredibly grateful for this dark light, free gift moment of my life. In short, I went on to prepare for deployment in the military, yet life somehow had other plans for me. So I got in part-time, and just to get the experience of it. And I always planned to go full-time, and basically I was itching to get away. I was itching to go and deploy and to get away from my life, and there were wars on, and I had friends going over there, and I had the chance to go and do that if I so choose. And it was sort of approaching that time where I was excited and maybe a little bit brainwashed and ready to rock and roll. My daughter was born, and I was required to choose between being a dad or not being around, and throwing out my long-winded technology career. It wasn't even a choice. I said goodbye to the Army, as well as the well-trained, undeployed soldier, and hello to my new life as a dad. I was soon to learn what true love meant, and the inseparable bond between my daughter and son that came later to fill my heart full of joy. Okay, I'm going to have to change a few words here, because this is probably just going to get banned straight up, what I'm going to say here. I call it the Great Deception, but I'll change a few things. In mid-2021, living my life as best as you could through this time of depression, I would call it, I had the first of many dreams. In my dream, a cylindrical tower exploded like a volcano, and waves as tall as the sky would race towards me. I went on to have several of these tsunami-like dreams. I would suddenly contract pneumonia in both lungs, symmetrical pneumonia. I've never been so sick. I'd been smoking on and off, which I'm sure wasn't really a great idea. A super fit guy smoking after a 30k run, yep, that was me. I would often quit for a while and relapse. Knowing what I know now, it was clearly the Lord sending me a message and testing what I would do next. During this time, my heart was out of control. I would go running early in the morning at 3 a.m. or late in the afternoon and be hitting a heart rate of 190 beats a minute while slow jogging, like just doing hardly anything. Sometimes even just getting out of bed, I'd wake up, my heart would go from my resting heart rate of around 48 to 190 doing nothing. Excuse me. These spikes would be up and down and were dangerous, yet with my stubbornness, I would persist and just push through this. The pneumonia recovery led me to spending my mornings waking early from 3 a.m. every morning to start searching for the truth in what was really going on. Each piece of information would unlock another. So I was basically sick, right? And the world's going through this crazy time. I'm thinking to myself, what's going on here? My spidey senses were tingling and I just knew something was not right. So every morning I get up at 3 and start searching for the truth. Each piece of information would unlock another. There were many paths I went on that would lead me to being somewhat deceived. So I would reset and reevaluate until everything fit together. It was a game of discernment. I started to explain these things and my concerns to my wife, who reassured but clearly did not believe me at the time. And the depth of my sadness of what I learnt, I was distraught that my children's future would soon be stolen from them. I felt so alone. Everyone was telling me to get the potion, and I didn't have a single friend in the world that would listen to my evidence on why this must be avoided. Even my parents were telling me to do this. I knew in my heart that it was not right, a ruse, a plan, control, divide, conquer. The tipping point came when I was told that I would lose my job if I didn't have this by a specific date. I didn't have the funds to support myself even for a short period of time without a job. It was several weeks before my daughter's birthday, and just to explain, there were some other financial commitments I had going that had kicked off that meant I couldn't free that money up and get out of it. It was several weeks before my daughter's birthday. I wasn't even allowed to walk into a freaking shop to buy her a present without a digital certificate. It deeply hurt me. I felt like a failure as a parent. Online orders were not arriving for weeks, and thus my moment of weakness began. They had also taken my gym membership away. I loved the gym. I felt like a superhero when I worked out. This was ego, I know now, but I felt uncommon amongst anyone there and would train harder than anyone in that place with a spirit of strength that seemed to come from deep within. Out of nowhere, references kept appearing on my phone to this amino acid, which I'll put in the description. I won't say it here. Whenever I was reading these things, I'm not sure what triggered me to explore it, but it saved my life. It certainly resonated with me as something I needed to pursue, so I ordered some more. The more I learned, the more I realized, glutathione was the cure for this. As it turns out, it would not arrive in time before my moment of weakness, my most regretful moment in my life, bar none. I was physically shaking, crying inside and terrified when I had the first shot, when that needle went in. Everything about it felt wrong. Makes me angry now thinking about it, to be honest. But God does not put hate in my heart anymore. I forgive. I felt like the doctor with his shirt sleeve rolled up and a hall full of strange-looking people was getting off on doing this. It felt in my heart like a murder camp, and I couldn't believe I was here. I was even more scared as I had just recovered from the pneumonia, and they would not grant me an exception, even knowing that the doctor had said there was a chance I would most likely react bad to this. Not even 30 seconds after the first poison hit my veins, my wrists froze up and hurt. I began to experience a seasickness that lasted many hours. My wrists hurt so badly I had to take my watch off. The anxiety elevated so much that my stomach was in knots all night. I knew my tablets were not going to be here in time, the magic tablets, so I purchased another solution to upregulate my glutathione and took them as soon as I went home. For several days I was bedridden, vomited orange-red bile mixed with blood several times, had obvious thrombosis of the wrists, and my heart rate, normally resting in the late 40s, was hitting nearly 190 BPM again. Here we go again. I thought, what have you done, you fool? You knew this was a deception. What, so you could go to the shops, so you could go to the gym, so you could have these worldly things. Why did you listen to them? They're all deceived. Everyone's deceived. After recovering for several weeks, I had the second one, so I could complete the cycle of idiocy and sacrifice my own health to keep my job and prevent my family being kicked out on the street. I had officially sold out to a lie and gone against everything I believed in my heart to follow. I was mad at myself, mad at the world, and completely lost and overwhelmed. Yet at work, nobody would know. I'd smile and act like nothing was wrong. I was lying to myself and to others. I literally wanted to leave this world. Thought of so many ways and even planned how I would do it. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, the thing about men, especially men who, obviously trained and done all these violent things, is they come up with some really creative ways to end it for themselves. And I tell you what, at the time I was not in a good place, and I would never ever be in that place again. But I also empathize with anybody that does get into that place, and I will say to you that there's no price you could ever pay that will make that worth it. God will save you, okay? Like, don't ever think that is the right thing to do. Don't ever use that. Don't ever think that that's an exit, because it's not an option. With my heart literally rebroken from the toxins, I began to take stock of what I needed to do to recover from this. I was computing, calculating, retracing and evaluating everything and everyone around me. I had to get better for my kids. So we started running. My recovery from sin. The first of many runs would see these heart rate spikes return. I knew that was helping. Within 2 days of taking it, I said the magic stuff. Within 2 days of taking it, it was the best I'd felt for weeks. I stuck to a routine and slowly watched my heart rate settle back to normal again. I began to grow wary of people being ignorant to the things that were going on. It had really taken a toll on me. It ended up taking 7 months of sheer hard work and will to recover back to a healthy state pre-potion. That was me throwing literally everything at it. I had at it. Early mornings, consistency, fasting, careful nutrition, all the things. New dreams started to happen and come in. Crawling through a tunnel of thorns, being eye-tattooed by tall robots, more tsunami and volcano dreams, warnings rolled in. I began getting the sudden urge to prepare for something. I kept hearing, get food, get water. So I began to scramble and start to work on these things daily. And I tell you what, I kept hearing this. Like, there was not a moment that if I was resting or not focused on that goal, I would start to hear these things come back. And it was like the voice in my head talking, but it would just come out of nowhere. And it wasn't even influenced by what I wanted or anything. It was complete instruction. And at first, I know this sounds a bit silly, but at first it was like, this magic potions, like they're doing something here. They're playing some sort of mind control tricks on me. And, and I knew I'd gotten all that nasty metal stuff out of my body by then. So I knew that was not the case. My awakening, God's forgiveness and mercy. One day, while feeling completely depleted, devastated, utterly spent, absolutely spent, I decided to organise my garage at home and do a little prepping. I was walking around and the door of my garage was raised. I could hear my daughter giggling behind me somewhere, just playing and being a beautiful self. The sun suddenly hit me in my eyes. Not just like I walked into it, but like it pointed at me. In my temporary blindness, and I mean blindness, 2 beautiful butterflies flew in perfectly under the door. I was in so much shock and awe. I don't know whether they touched me and kept flying or if they landed on me. My memory's a little hazy on this, but they flew around me and directly over to my daughter. It was like the perfect moment. And I'm a fairly calm sort of person, like thinking of this really gets my heart racing, and it does. At the time, I could make no sense of this whatsoever, but it profoundly impacted my thoughts for days to come. If I could describe this moment, it was completely out of the blue. There was nothing I was feeling that was different, except for I was absolutely in the depth of my misery. Like that morning, I woke up devastated, absolutely devastated with what was happening. And I barely got myself functioning and came down to my garage, which is at the lower level of my house. And I slinked down the stairs, just moping. And I had an audiobook on, just trying to take my mind off it, doing some prepping stuff. And yeah, the way I described the light, not just the sunlight, but it was like a white light of like what they describe as like glory, okay? And it sounds crazy and sounds mad, but it was not just the sun. It was like this white, really intense white light that was around those sunbeams. And when it hit me, it absolutely like, and I'll use a, bit of crude language here, but I nearly shit myself because it was, it was so unexpected. It took me by surprise. I cannot emphasize how much that moment just took me by surprise. It was special, and my daughter saw it, and that was just incredible that she was there to see that. And I'm not sure she saw the light, but she saw the butterflies, and she loved that. Just 1 second. I began researching what this might mean. I kept seeing references to God and thinking, surely it can't be this. This stayed with me for several months, trying to make sense of the situation. At the time, I had been watching a YouTube channel frequently who had great insights into some of the symbology and meanings found in many of these pre-programmed narratives. Rugi, you're a dead set legend, by the way. And he often spoke about the gospel during this time, where I'd subconsciously listen to him. Around 7 weeks ago, it's a bit longer now, but anyway, since I wrote this, I had a dream about attending the gun range. I hadn't been to a gun range in years, but I felt compelled to do this all of a sudden. I was nervous, and I was thinking about it a lot before I went to sleep. Anyone who's done a lot of shooting, especially on the range, will remember there's a lot to it. There's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that you need. You get rusty if you don't practice. You also, it's generally a very male-dominated environment or sport where, there's a lot of ego there. People don't openly say, oh, that was terrible, but, that's what they're thinking. And so you do get a little bit self-conscious when you go out there if you haven't been out there for a while. And if you don't know the people, they're all strangers and whatnot, and everybody watches you to make sure you're safe and all these things. So I was a bit nervous, and normally, once I'm comfortable with something, I don't really get the nerves. I'm usually a very confident sort of person. But that time I was really, a bit shaken up by that. So I was thinking about that before I went to sleep. In my dream, I was in a completely white building, searching for the male toilets. Unsure why I couldn't find them. It was quite frustrating in my dream. I was like, where are the men's toilets? And it appeared to be a maze of doors. It was huge, this place. It reminded me of like a gigantic office, but it was all pure white. And a man came up to see me and said, oh, you're here. We need to go sight your rifle in. Follow me. So I followed him outside and ended up in this huge, magnificent open space, this huge mountainous area. And, knowing what I know now, it looked a lot like just any of those places in, any Middle Eastern area with huge mountains and beautiful landscape, big open, beautiful landscape. The dark-haired man in my dream took off ahead of me and remained that way. I was walking over these huge mountains and over this giant rise. As I came up over this rise in my dream, I saw a clear divide between a temple on the left and a beautiful creek on the right. And I remember that there were children laughing, jumping off a swing, splashing in the water and playing and on the ride. And it sounded like they were just not a care in the world. On the left was a small temple. In the sky was a circle of cows just spinning around like this slowly. They were cows, like a carousel. As I approached the temple, I was telling myself, there better not be doing any rituals here, or I'm out of here, or anything evil. As I got closer to the curtain, acting as a door to the temple, I heard them say something like, "It is a test, Nathaniel. Newcomers must take." As I peeked through the curtains, it was something like that. I can't recall the exact words, but I remember they were talking about me as I was walking up to the temple, and then they were talking with each other, and they used the word Nathaniel multiple times. I'm not clear to this day whether they were referring to me as Nathaniel or whether they were talking to Nathaniel. As I peeked through the curtains, I saw them all dressed in red robes. I was terrified. I turned around to run, and that's when I woke up from the dream. I've never ever heard the name Nathaniel before this moment, in respect to anything that I know. So I began to search on who he is, or who he was. This led me to watching the Chosen series, which is the story of Jesus and his disciples, which really opened my eyes on a few things. I think it kind of softened me to a few things, or at the time I was a little bit like, I don't know. I don't know about these religious shows. I don't really think this is me. It led me down a path of exploring this more and more. I think God might have been trying to tell me I either related to the truth teller, who was Nathaniel, or he was trying to call me the truth teller. And the thing is that anyone who knows me knows that I'm always trying to help people, always trying to tell them what's really going on. Everybody tells lies and fibs and things like that, and everybody embellishes the truth. And there are times where I've done that, but this is not one of those times. And I certainly, my path now, and after being reborn, I do not do that anymore. I do not need to make my story bigger and broader than it is. But yeah, I've always prided myself on at least searching for truth and always believing the truth and being kind of righteous in that way. Okay, so this is the last part, I believe. Here I stand, renewed and grateful. I read from the Bible every morning for a little bit. I believe the 3 days of darkness is a real thing and coming. I believe Wormwood, or Planet X system, that's been around us for thousands of years is not far away, and the first trumpet is upon us. The gestures of wearing these items helps me to stay focused and remember to maintain this path, to focus on finding truth and other truth tellers. There is a lot more I could tell you, but this is a huge amount to digest. So I hope I haven't overwhelmed you with all this information. Some other dreams I've had, just briefly. Soccer ball-sized ice was raining down from the sky. People were hanging people in the street for fun. A man was taped up who I thought was dead and woke up as he was being placed in a tree shredder. I had a dream recently about the storm with the red sky coming and returning. I've had dreams about the stars falling from the sky, the moon the moon turning red, and the sky turning red. And then I've had all sorts of other smaller dreams and suggestions and words. That's pretty much my story. These days I'm still learning the gospel. I read my Bible every day. I spend a period of time every day in the morning, several hours, researching the latest news and what's going on. I will continue to post videos and discuss a range of different topics. I feel like God really wants me to do this, and I don't want to let him down, even though, to be honest, I'm not 100% comfortable with this. But I hope that it helps somebody. I hope it helps somebody that may have some doubts or maybe halfway there, because time is running out, people. Like, it's really, we're down to the last moments of this world, I do believe, and we need to take an approach of repentance and finding God and understanding that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and to save us, and And we need to understand these things. We need to stop treating this as some fabrication, or don't look at this like religion, okay? You don't have to go to church if you choose not to. I'm not going to go to church unless I feel the need to, okay? My church is my little room with my Bible and my candle. That's my church, all right? You don't have to get right into all that stuff. I'm just telling you now, this is very real. This is not a joke anymore. It's not a joke, all right? So please, just heed my words. Look into it. You can make fun of me, mock me if you want. It doesn't matter to me anymore. Okay, I've made my peace in this world. I've done everything that I've been here to do. All right, I live here for my kids, and that's it. All right, God bless. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.